rely on India to lead the way. Vishwaguru spotlight on India now. India to write world's new rules? Can India meet massive expectations? Big focus on Newstrack.
We had the finance ministers meeting in Bengaluru last week. Now the foreign affairs ministers meeting in the capital. The G20 presidency for India well and truly underway. Here's a look at the headlines I'm tracking tonight. Arvind Kejriwal compares Prime Minister Modi to Indira Gandhi, says Sisodia was arrested to stop AAP's good work.
उनको कहना चाहता हूं इन लोगों को बीजेपी वालों को आम आदमी पार्टी आंधी है आंधी अब ये किसी के रोके रुकने वाली नहीं है no one can stop the idea whose time has come and Aam Aadmi Party's time has come.
Mallikarjun Kharge makes a U-turn on his Congress will lead opposition alliance in 2024 comment, says he never named any party. This as Akhilesh Tejaswi and Farooq Abdullah come together for Stalin's 70th birthday bash. Bulldozers raise property of Umesh Pal murder accused Atik AIDS case in Prayagraj. Yogi Adityanath hits out at the SP and Akhilesh Yadav. Foreign funding license of think tank Centre for Policy Research suspended. CPR issues statement, says it will cooperate with authorities. Foreign Minister schools the UK Foreign Secretary who raised the issue of BBC tax raids. Jaishankar says all foreign entities operating in India need to abide with the law fully. India is hosting the biggest ever G20 foreign ministers meeting in New Delhi, but it comes against the backdrop of divisions within the grouping of the world's largest economies over the Ukraine crisis. Building a consensus is one of the key challenges confronting India. Can India write the world's new rules and meet these massive expectations? Our Foreign Affairs editor, Geeta Mohan, with our lead story tonight.
Made up of 19 countries and the European Union, accounting for nearly two-thirds of the world population, 85% of the global economic output, and created almost a quarter century ago to unite world leaders around shared challenges. The Group of 20 stands sharply divided in 2023. With India hosting the foreign ministers of the world's major economies in New Delhi, the event seems already overshadowed by tensions over the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
You represent the leadership of global finance and economy at a time when the world is facing serious economic difficulties.
As the new president of the G20, India on its part has already sought to set the bar, a leading voice of the developing nations. New Delhi prioritizes other key issues affecting the world.
I don't think it would be really correct for me to prejudge the outcome of the G20 foreign ministers meeting. I think we should let the plenipotentiaries of the G20 foreign ministers meeting decide that on their own. For us, the questions relating to the food, energy and the fertilizer security, the impact that the conflict has on these economic challenges that we face.
During the finance ministers' meeting in Bengaluru late last month, China and Russia refused to sign the joint statement over how Russia's invasion of Ukraine was described. Leaders from countries such as the US and France wanted the condemnation of Moscow for the invasion. The European conflict continues to loom heavily over the meeting of the world's top G20 diplomats in the Indian capital. Before UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's even landed in New Delhi, Britain's Foreign Office declared he would continue to call out Russian aggression in Ukraine at the meeting of G20 foreign ministers. In a statement from Moscow, Russia blamed the US and its allies for the Ukraine crisis. Over 40 delegations from G20 member states, 13 international organizations, and representatives from 9 guest countries in New Delhi. On Thursday, the External Affairs Minister scheduled to host sessions on multilateral cooperation, food and energy security, skill mapping, and disaster relief. Bilaterals with most of his counterparts also on the cards. But the elephant in the room remains the Russia-Ukraine war, coinciding with the first anniversary of the conflict. With Geeta Mohan in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Will also be on the big India-China bilateral that is set to take place on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang's bilateral with Jaishankar is likely to take place between 11:30 and 12:30 tomorrow. This is the first visit by a Chinese Foreign Minister to India since the Galwan clashes.
The India-China standoff at the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh since May 2020 is expected to top the agenda of the bilateral meeting between External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart Qin Gang in the national capital. Speaking to journalists ahead of the meet, Foreign Secretary gave details of India's focus areas in the crucial grouping and also on the scheduled bilaterals on the sidelines.
चाइना की वार्ता को लेकर जैसे कि मैंने कहा कि ये अपेक्षित है कि विदेश मंत्री जी अपने जितने जो द्विपक्षीय अन्य मंत्रीगण हैं उनसे भेंट वार्ता करने की उनकी अपेक्षा है। उस भेंट वार्ता में मुद्दे क्या होंगे, किन विषयों पे चर्चा होगी, वो उस मीटिंग के बाद ही उपरांत ही आपके समक्ष लाया जाए तो ज़्यादा उचित रहेगा।
China had announced Foreign Minister Qin will be attending the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in person. And China's focus will remain on seeking solutions to the prominent challenges the global economy faces, along with emphasis on multilateralism. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has repeatedly emphasized that ties between India and China cannot be normalized till the situation along the borders is peaceful. He insisted India was neither on the defensive nor afraid to name China, and the fact that more than 50,000 troops remain deployed at the line of actual control since 2020 was an indication of India's firm resolve.
If we were being accommodative, who sent the Indian army to the LAC? Rahul Gandhi didn't send them. Narendra Modi sent them. Okay? We have today the largest peacetime deployment in our history on the China border.
India and China have had 17 rounds of talks at the level of the core commanders, along with multiple rounds of talks at the level of the foreign ministries of both the countries. China too has increased permanent deployment of its forces, strengthening its defences along the LAC in eastern Ladakh, opposite Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh, forcing India to speed up its border infrastructure development. However, the Congress took a jibe at the government, claiming massive lapses resulting in Indian soldiers being put in harm's way. Former External Affairs Minister Salman Khurshid accused the government of mishandling the China issue.
समय देश के सामने बहुत प्रश्न मंडरा रहे हैं कि आखिर चीन की सीमा पर और एलएसी पर क्या हो रहा है। लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल पर जो गतिविधियां चीन की रही हैं उनसे हम संतुष्ट कैसे हो सकते हैं, और अगर उसके बारे में कोई बात है वो सरकार को जनता के सामने या विपक्ष के सामने रखनी चाहिए ताकि हम संतुष्ट हो सके कि हमारे साथ व्यवहार जो चाइना कर रहा है उस व्यवहार में हम कहीं कमजोर नहीं पड़े, हम कहीं पीछे नहीं हटे, हम कहीं किसी कमी का शिकार नहीं हुए.
This was in response to the External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, insisting it was the Narendra Modi government that had deployed additional troops at the LAC to protect India's borders and interests. All eyes now are on the meeting between Dr. Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart Quinn to see whether tension is dialed down at the remaining friction points at the LAC. Bureau Report, India Today.
Can India find a way of fostering cooperation amid conflict? I want to break up the Newstrack tonight into three parts. One, you've got the meeting between the Indian and the Chinese foreign affairs ministers. Second, you've got all the conflict that rages in the world, particularly Russia, Ukraine, and whether India can help mediate some kind of a ceasefire or peace formula. Is that at all within the realm of possibility? A lot of world leaders have been talking about Prime Minister Modi playing a role. Is it actually achievable? And C, you've got India trying to use the G20 presidency to establish its credentials as a middle power globally, and this presidency really serving as a stepping board for India. So to talk about that and more, we're joined on this broadcast by Vivek Kaju, former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. We've got Sushant Sareen, strategic affairs expert at the Observer Research Foundation, for a perspective of the thinking in Beijing. I'm joined by Enar Tenjen. For a perspective on the thinking within Russia, we are joined by Alexander Bretsky. He's a senior foreign policy writer. Mohan Kumaramangalam represents the Congress. Zayyad Zafar Islam from the BJP, and Geeta Mohan is our foreign affairs editor. Geeta, I'll start with you on that big meeting between the Indian foreign affairs minister and the Chinese foreign affairs minister. There's been a change of guard in China, the new foreign affairs minister coming over for the first time. Is this just a courtesy bilateral meeting given the fact that they're all here for the G20 foreign affairs ministers meeting? Or do you think because Xi Jinping is going to be in India in September, there is a possibility that China and India have to make some progress before September to lay the ground for Modi and Xi to meet in Delhi?
Well, Rahul, I'd say it's the latter. The fact that China has to be present in two very important summits that India is going to host, that's the SCO mid-year, and then later the G20 summit in September. So there are two very important summits, not just one. And China, SCO is China and Russia's baby. So you would want Putin and Xi Jinping's representation at the SCO. Whether if there's going to be forward movement with Qin Gang coming, who's tipped to be the state councillor very soon, is something we'll have to wait and see. There are a lot of niggling issues between the two sides. It is not going to be, it cannot be tied over with one meeting, but this is a very crucial meeting if, as Vinay Quatra, our foreign secretary, said, there is an expected bilateral. If that comes through, there will be some maybe forward movement in how they would want things to move forward. Post Galwan, we've had one very big bilateral visit by Wang Yi to India, and this is the second very big visit by Qin Gang, who is tipped to be a very important person in CPC.
Sushant Sareen, your reading, does Qin Gang come with a mandate of ensuring that the needle moves forward? It hasn't so far in the boundary talks. It's been deadlocked in certain areas in the Depsang Plains. Will there be some forward movement tomorrow and going forward, given that she has to come to India later in the year? Or do you think this is just going to be a very basic courtesy meeting without any substantial takeaway?
Look, I think all the courtesies will certainly be extended. I don't know how substantial the takeaways will be. I wouldn't be very surprised if there's some minor movement forward, and that is then showcased that, you know, as things are moving forward. Otherwise, we really haven't seen any indication coming from Beijing that they're ready to back down on the kind of aggressive policies which they followed along the LAC. In fact, quite to the contrary, if you look at the kind of propaganda stuff which is coming out of there, it seems that they are kind of doubling down on their adventurism. So whether there will be that big breakthrough, which to my mind is that, you know, you go back to the situation as it was before August 2020. And if that is not going to happen, then yeah, there might be some incremental progress. You know, they will come up with a nice statement, which will be looking forward to talking some more and then trying to sort out these issues. But if Wang Yi's visit did not lead to any major breakthrough, then I would be a little surprised if this visit is going to lead to a major breakthrough.
Okay.
And in any case, if a breakthrough has to happen, then I think even if they're preparing the ground, then that breakthrough will happen if the two principals are meeting. But will the two principals actually announce a breakthrough at a time of a summit meeting and then overshadow that summit meeting? So I'm a little skeptical if that's
No, but if a breakthrough is to happen, it might happen in the build-up to that summit meeting. So by the time she lands in India, sab changa si. Now that's just the idealistic, looking at it from the outside perspective, Vivek
Yeah, but
Khadju.
then that overtakes the entire other
Possible,
meeting.
but possible. Is that the right way of looking at it? You've been there, done that, been in such situations. How would you be prepping for tomorrow's meeting with the Chinese foreign minister? What do you think is the most likely outcome? Is there likely to be any?
Look, Rahul, the 1990s arrangements, I think, are over. Jaishankar has said often that we want to go back to status quo ante. I don't see that happening. So we have to arrive at a new normal. The question is, can there be a new normal which will be satisfactory to India? Because the aggression has been on the part of China. It is China which broke the 1990 arrangements. As of now, I see no real evidence of a desire on the part of China to move purposely forward in this direction. Therefore, I would be delighted if something positive emerges tomorrow, but I am a little skeptical and pessimistic as of now, because the India for China, quite frankly, is a sideshow. The Chinese are aiming to be in the same bracket as the United States. They don't consider us any more than an irritant. The last point I'll say is that Jaishankar was absolutely right. You played a clip where he said that we have now vastly augmented our deployments on the LAC. That is entirely true. But that itself is indicative of a new normal. So we've got to wait and see how will this new normal play out.
And Tenjan, can you give us your reading of the situation from the perspective of Beijing as best as you understand? Do you think that the Chinese foreign minister comes to India with the hope of making some kind of a breakthrough? Is there likely to be some movement on the impasse at the border?
I think, as Geeta pointed out, the elephant in the room at this juncture is the possibility of a nuclear war being started in Ukraine, and that is going to be one of the main focuses of Qin Gang. He's very concerned. China has been very unusual in proposing that it get involved in the peace process. This is not something they do very often. They are very concerned about it. I think most of the talk will be along those lines, although obviously there will be a lot of attention paid to the meeting of the two leaders and what that will entail.
Can you just build on what you said, because you did mention the frightening prospect of nuclear war, but you mostly sidestepped the question on what you think might emerge out of the meeting between the Indian Foreign Affairs Minister and Qin Gang?
As I said, I think what China would like to see is have India participate as an equal partner in a multilateral world of powers that sit down with the United States, Europe, Ukraine, and Russia, and say that, look, enough is enough. It's not just this conflict is not just hurting the players directly involved, but the entire world. I mean, there's so many developing countries, and I think this is in line with what India was trying to do, to point this meeting at the economic needs of the rest of the world. So I don't know that there's going to be any breakthroughs or any announcements about the line of actual control or the border issues. I think it's going to be more about, what India has said this meeting is about, which is focusing on the economic consequences that are coming out of a war that it did not start, does not want to be a part of, just like most of the world.
Okay, so now let's come to Russia, Ukraine. What is likely possible in the context of this G20 meeting. And I want to go across to Alexander Bratesky to give us a sense of the thinking in Moscow, because for the most part, Russia was a pariah state in the G20 deliberations in Indonesia. India does share a long-standing relationship with Russia, and that's led to some unpleasantness or unhappiness in the Western world. But for Russian leaders, much more welcome in India than they are in Europe at the moment, for sure. What do you think could potentially emerge from this G20 foreign affairs meeting from the perspective of Moscow?
Well, I'm not expecting anything, for, let's say, for the Ukrainian conflict to sort of like, not the end, of course, but sort of like any real negotiations, or maybe some signals could be sent, but not really big signals. The situation is very difficult. I mean, the Chinese peaceful plan was actually very welcomed in Russia, but unfortunately or fortunately, this plan is actually not concrete, but that's very Chinese way of saying. At least President Zelensky says something positive about this plan on some parts of the plan, but everybody wants to pick some cherries from this plan. However, Russia, yes, as you have mentioned, have good relationship with both countries, with China, which is a authoritarian state, and India, which is a democratic state, but both are partners. Both countries now have difficulties over its own problems, so it's very difficult for India and China to push Russia, kind of like jointly to push Russia into some kind of a Ukrainian solution, although I understand both countries want to end this conflict. And as the resolution was mentioned, the wording in the resolution, of course, is not acceptable by President Putin or any of his entourage in the Kremlin, because, well, of course, people could see it as an aggression, and it's clear it is an aggression against the sovereign state. However, of course, nobody in the Kremlin would buy this, and nobody's going to change the language either. So it's very difficult now to find anything, any possibility, because it looks like even Putin's message to the world and his State of the Union address that he addressed recently does not contain something really radical. I mean, except anti-Western rhetoric, which is usual. So it looks like he's sort of saying, like, let's start doing something over this. Yes, I have made this, but let's do something, but nobody's listening to, because, I mean, the West and the United States, of course, doing the same things as they were doing. I mean, Russians actually put themselves in the situation, so let's supply weapons. Let's do what we ever done in Afghanistan with the Soviets years ago.
Day before, late at night, I was speaking to one of the senior most ministers in the Modi government, and what he said with great confidence is that you wait and watch, over the next few months, Prime Minister Modi will help engineer some kind of a truce between Russia and Ukraine. That will be the highlight of India's G20 presidency. Sushant Sareen, now, is that in any realistic sense within the realm of, one thing is what the BJP would like to see happen, the other is realpolitik and how it plays out. Nations have a mind of their own. They put their self-interest first. They're not particularly worried about the elections next year or about the fact that this is India's big year as the president of the G20. Is it at all possible that some kind of a solution be found while India is still present at the G20?
It's very possible.
Even if a solution is found, I would be very pleasantly surprised if it was a solution which was, promoted by India. At best, what India can do is try and bring the two sides together, but I don't think we should be in the business of even trying to mediate, because we'll get our fingers burned in this process. And I'm not even sure if the two parties actually are interested in a kind of a peace move right now. They all want peace, but at their own terms. Now, the Western Bloc, which is backing Ukraine, I think feels that they've got Russia where they want it, and they will keep pressing Russia and try and, really take its power down to a point where it ceases to be a threat. And the Russians on the other side are not willing to give up because it's a prestige issue for them as well. So I think we are in a deadlock situation, and in this particular G20, it'll be very surprising if we can come out with a communique, because I see the deadlock prevailing out here. If it happened at the time of the finance ministers meet, then and where the geopolitical issues could have taken a bit of a back seat, it'll certainly be in the forefront of the foreign ministers.
Let me put that question to Syed Zafar Islam. Does the absence of a joint communique at the end of the finance ministers meeting in Bengaluru put a lot of pressure on Jaishankar to demonstrate all his diplomatic skills to ensure that there is a joint communique at the end of the foreign affairs ministers meeting? Because if there isn't, there will be a lot of carping domestically, politically, internationally, that we're doing these big meetings and nothing much seems to be coming. There wasn't even enough consensus on a joint statement, even though in Indonesia there was, and very rarely do we see countries dialing back on text that they've agreed to. So that really does put a lot of pressure on India's foreign affairs minister to try and ensure that there is a basic understanding.
Well, Rahul, it is indeed a tough job, especially when whatever they had agreed in terms of the statement which had come out in Bali, the two countries have deviated from that, especially the word war. And our stated objective is very clear, and the position what we have taken so far, that the hostilities must end, and the peace should be achieved through dialogue and diplomacy. So that is our stated position. And even if you just recollect what the Honorable Prime Minister had said in the SCO summit in Samarkand, that the era of war is over, and we still feel that there is absolutely no headroom available for any conflict, and this can be achieved through diplomacy and dialogue. Okay, that is our stated objective. But there is no consensus, or at least at this point in time, the Foreign Secretary has very clearly stated that the discussions are on, and we cannot prejudge what exactly will be
Vivek
the
Kaju,
outcome
how
of the
worried
discussion.
would you
But
be
we are putting our sincere
by
effort,
the absence of a
sincere
joint
effort to
communique at the end of the finance ministers meeting, and there, because the focus was largely on debt relief and the global economic situation, you could still say that there are some grounds that can be covered which allows for a joint communique. But in the foreign affairs ministers meeting, if they're not discussing the Russia-Ukraine war, what in the world could they possibly be discussing? And therefore, is this really the biggest test of Foreign Minister Jaishankar's diplomatic skills, that there has to be some tangible outcome in the form of a joint statement at the end of this meeting?
Well, it's been my experience that the host of any multilateral conference, and especially if there's a conference like the foreign ministers of the G20, wants a joint communique. That is a standard thing, and does his utmost to see that there is one. Sometimes the situation is such that it is simply not possible. Jaishankar will have to be a miracle worker to achieve this. He is a man of great diplomatic skills, but he faces a mountain ahead of him. Now, there are two aspects to this. The first is substantive. Zafar Islam is absolutely right when he says that the crucial word which today has become contentious for the Russians and the Chinese is the word war.
But they agreed to it in Indonesia. Now, how can they dial back?
There is I don't precisely know what were the circumstances in which they agreed, but Rahul, it is perfectly within the right of sovereign states to dial back, to use your words. It's done all the time. You change national positions, you change your positions in multilateral spheres. There's nothing unusual.
Geeta, is there a lot of pressure within the External Affairs Ministry that you've got this, you want to tout this as a big achievement, but you already seen the likes of Shashi Tharoor and others coming out and hitting out using this politically? There
is immense pressure. There will have to be an outcome document, Rahul, but just to give you an understanding of why the dial back. Now, when the statement was used, Lavrov was negotiating, and so was the team from China, negotiating this entire statement that this is not an era of war, and it was included in the Bali declaration. And the Russian ambassador speaking to us had said that yes, we agree with the statement because it just means that it is not an era of war for any country, not for the West as well. They should also stop provoking. But when they saw that the West was running with the narrative, quoting Prime Minister Modi everywhere that this is not an era of war, almost making it look like India has sided with the West, is when Russia and China now are saying, we don't want these terms if these words are only going to impact us adversely.
And that's not acceptable to the rest of the world.
Acceptable.
But then that means that how do you come up with a joint communication?
It's going to be very difficult, Rahul, and this is only the second meeting. There are about a few very important ministerials that are going to take place, and in every
this
ministerial,
is the most important one.
We are going to see the friction, which means I don't know how the summit will come up with an outcome draft that will be acceptable to all. So we are headed for India. The challenges are two-pronged. One is to get an outcome document. Secondly, to get participation. If this is the way and fissures continue, then will we see a high-level participation from Xi Jinping and Putin or not? These are the important questions that India will have to work towards and navigate through the document.
Do you want to explain the thinking in China? Because in Indonesia, they agreed to the joint statement, which now, I mean, Russia's problem I understand, but China's problem I don't fully understand, because your country did agree to this statement, not your country, you're an American national, but China did agree to this statement in Indonesia and no longer seems to want to sign on the same document.
Well, I would reiterate what Geeta said. I think she has the correct analysis. At this juncture, I don't know that an initial statement or a joint communique is the real issue. It's really getting people talking. What we've had over the past many years is a loss of trust. The Russians feel very strongly that they were lied to both about NATO expansion and then in the two peace processes that were negotiated, which subsequently France and Germany's leaders said, oh, we weren't really going to comply with those. That was just, basically creating time to decide what we wanted to do. So in order to get this thing through, I don't think, and I do believe this is the largest issue, the Ukrainian crisis. In order to do that, you have to start setting a foundation. That's why China came out with 12 principles, guidelines to try to start it up. But China can't do this alone, and I do think that India and Modi have a very, very important equal role to play, along with other major countries in the region, to try to get this on a firm peace footing. And that includes Europe. Europe has to feel that this cannot be a forever war. It has to be ended, and you're starting to see that. There's rumors of a UK, France, Germany kind of encouragement to Zelensky that he won't be left in the cold, although he will not be able to join NATO directly.
Alexander Bratsky, can you give us your sense of the thinking in Moscow? Will Putin be coming to India for the Leaders' Summit in September? What are the conditions in which you think he could travel? In Indonesia, he chose not to go. It's only the Foreign Affairs Minister who went. How do you see that process move from here?
Well, I think President Putin will not risk his good relationship with India. He will definitely come over in September if the situation allows him to do. I mean, if there's going to be now serious defeat of the Russian armed forces in Ukraine by somehow, or some other situation happens, let's say, whatever. So, but he will definitely come because he values Prime Minister Modi relationship, and he values relationship with President Chairman Xi. So he definitely will come over. But that, of course, would be good for him and for Indian side, that he will have something to say, something to deliver about his own peace plan, let's say, because he is also giving sort of conflicting messages on the situation in Ukraine. The Russian side says it's winning, but we don't see victories. However, there are some parts of Russian population which is, of course, most of them supporting President Putin and the goals of this whatever special operation, how you call it. Other parts, which may be a radical one, defeat of its own forces, which is also very bad. I think there's going to be no defeat, no capitulation. Nobody's going to raise a flag on the Kremlin, but That's of course stupidity. But however, that of course will be some kind of a Korean scenario, some kind of another scenario which would stop this conflict. And because yes, as one of the speakers has mentioned, nobody wants this war to go for forever.
But what are the conditions under which they're willing to push towards peace? Vivek, Kaju, when was the last time India did something as big as this at the international level, hosting a meeting of this stature like we will when the G20 leader summit happens in the capital?
I can only, I don't think this meeting has a precedent. The only twice that I remember that we hosted something very big was way back in the 1980s when we hosted the non-aligned summit under very difficult circumstances, and also the Chopra, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting.
Yeah, but those don't have the kind of heavyweight presence that the G20 does.
Precisely. That's why I said this is unprecedented. But because of that and because of the Ukraine crisis, and at the end of the day, the Russian-Ukraine situation is a fratricidal situation. And fratricidal situations are the most difficult to resolve. To my mind, the amalgamation of Ukrainian territory into Russia makes this problem almost impossible now to resolve, even if Putin weren't there. Which government in Moscow would undo what Putin has done in that respect? So therefore, the ceasefire is the best we can hope for, and I doubt if the objective situation of the parties is such that they are willing for a ceasefire, especially because Ukraine is being egged on by the West.
So we leave it there just for the time being.
Have a very tough job on their hands. And as I said, it will be a miracle. And miracles are...
In diplomacy, miracles are hard to come by because everyone's just looking at his national interest. They're not worried about, the legacy that India leaves behind as G20 president. And if there is no joint communique, then questions will be asked about the outcome, about India's success in hosting the summit and what actually came of it. This is, make no mistake, one of the biggest challenges of Minister Jaishankar's political career as a politician, as a diplomat, because how do you bring, Geeta, these warring brothers together, and how do you ensure that there's some outcome, because you can't declare success unless at the very least you were able to show that everybody agreed to a joint draft.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be complex. Geeta has some really big interviews. We're very excited about coming up tomorrow. I don't want to give too much away, but she's got some big exclusives lined up. So do stay tuned to our coverage all through the day tomorrow and the day after. When I come back on the other side of a quick break, bulldozers erase property of Umesh Pal murder accused Atik's aide in Prayagraj. Details coming up on the other side. Stay with us.
India Today Conclave 2023, March 17th and 18th, New Delhi. Listen to S. Jaishankar, Shashi Tharoor, Justice U. Lalit, Justice Sharad Arvind Bobde, Sanjeev Goenka, Anil Agarwal, The India Moment.
आजकल रिलेशनशिप में घुसना आसान है, उसमें से निकलना मुश्किल। रिश्ता जोड़ना आसान है, तोड़ना मुश्किल। इसलिए झूठ बोल के पकड़वाना नहीं है, बल्कि झूठ बोल के सच में छुपाना है, फिर दो और झूठों में छुपाना है, फिर सच में छुपा के उस सच में झूठ की मिलावट का हल्का सा हिंट देना है। वो लड़की है, बाकी वो खुद कर लेगी, तुझे बस हल्का सा शक कराना है।
Ranbir Kapoor, who's awaiting the release of his upcoming romantic flick, Tu Jhooti Main Makkar, was recently spotted playing a cricket match with Saurav Ganguly. The teams were divided into two, Dada's Jhooti 11 and Ranbir's Makkar 11. The pictures from the same are going viral on the internet. Directed by Love Ranjan, the film also stars Shraddha Kapoor and Dimple Kapadia in key roles.
रिश्ता जोड़ना आसान है, तोड़ना मुश्किल।
नमस्ते पंडित जी, कुंडलियां मिलवानी थी।
अभी जल्दी क्या है? बुरा बन के ब्रेकअप तो कोई भी कर सकता है। खूबसूरत ब्रेकअप वो होता है जिसमें सामने वाले को, उसके घर वालों को, रिश्तेदारों को, सबको लगे कि लड़की तो बहुत प्यारी है, हमारे लड़के में ही खोट है।
रोक तो ले भाई, क्या कर रहा है, एक बार तो रोक। मुझे उद्देश्य नहीं दिख रहा यार तेरी जिंदगी का। अब क्या करेगा जी के?
तू झूठी मैं मक्कार is all set to hit cinemas on March 8.
तेरे प्यार में दिल चाहता है बस भीगे, तेरे प्यार में दुआ मांगता है बस भीगे भीगे भीगे।
Entertainment Bureau, India Today.
अब इसे मैं बताऊंगा कि किसी मासूम के दिल से खेलने का नतीजा क्या होता है। इसे खेलना है ना, खेलते हैं।
State of war ends. Now for verdict. Super suspense for 3 state results. Experience a new high in verdict reporting.
We have the most accurate pollster with us. Absolutely bang on.
Accurate results at blinding speed. The only verdict broadcast India will watch. Verdict Day with the #1 election team.
UP's Bulldozer Baba is back in action. Dozers rolled onto the streets of Prayagraj today to raise the house of the murder accused in the Umesh Pal case. This was the house where the shooters allegedly hid. The house belonged to gangster turned Neta Atiq Ahmed's close aide Zafar. Take a look at this report from Prayagraj.
माफिया कोई भी हो, सरकार की 0 टॉलरेंस की नीति है और उन माफियाओं के खिलाफ मिट्टी में मिलाने का काम उनको हमारी सरकार करेगी।
Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath is quite literally turning the mafia to dust. Days after shooting off a warning to gangsters, Bulldozer Baba, as he's been tagged off late, is back. Days after the shocking murder of prime witness Umesh Pal, the crackdown on gangster Atiq Ahmed and his aides has touched top gear. Today in Prayagraj, bulldozers rolled down the streets and targeted Ahmed's aide Khalid Zafar as his 2.5 crore property, according to authorities, was illegal.
ये मकान बनाया गया था जिसका नक्शा पास नहीं था और इसको लेकर के प्रयागराज विकास प्राधिकरण नोटिस देता रहा, लेकिन नोटिस का जवाब नहीं दिया गया। और अब जब प्रशासन ने, प्रयागराज विकास प्राधिकरण ने अवैध निर्माण के साथ साथ उमेश पाल मर्डर केस का क्राइम एंगल भी टटोल लिया है, क्राइम एंगल पता कर लिया है, तो उसके बाद से, क्राइम एंगल पता करने के बाद से अब ये माना जा रहा है कि ये बुलडोजर की कार्रवाई है। ये अभी शुरुआत है उन लोगों की जो अतीक अहमद या उमेश पाल मर्डर केस में मददगार थे, पनाहगार थे।
It was in this 2-storied house that the killers of witness Umesh Pal hid after committing the murder on Saturday. Before the house was completely razed down, arms were recovered from inside. Guns and swords were seized, and cops believe all of it belonged to Atiq Ahmed and his gang.
ये उसके घर से ये असलहा मिला है, ये असलहा लेकर के जा रहे हैं। ये कौन
के घर से मिला है?
घर से मिला।
घर से मिला।
क्या मिला? ये कौन सी बंदूक?
इसके अलावा एक और गन थी अभी, वो भी मिली है। 2 मिली है।
तलवार भी लेकर
एक तलवार मिली है।
अच्छा, ये कौन सी क्या मिला इनके पास?
ज्यादा आइडिया नहीं है, विदेशी गन है, ज्यादा आइडिया नहीं।
The UP government has meanwhile defended the bulldozer drive, even as the move has been slammed by the opposition. CM Yogi Adityanath made it clear he will continue with this drive, come what may.
हर समस्या के दो समाधान, भाग लो या भाग। या तो उसे चुनौती के रूप में स्वीकार करते हुए उसका सामना करो, उस प्रकार की कार्य योजना बनाओ और उसके समाधान के स्तर पर पहुंचाओ, जैसे कि 6 वर्ष के अंदर किया गया।
जो अपराधी है और उसके खिलाफ कार्रवाई करना, यह पुलिस प्रशासन का दायित्व भी है। और जो अपराध हुआ है प्रयागराज में श्री उमेश पाल जी की हत्या का, वह साधारण अपराध नहीं है।
हर रोज लॉ एंड ऑर्डर इनका जीरो टॉयलेट फेल होता जा रहा है और हर जिले में घटनाएं बढ़ रही है और इनका बुलडोजर पूरी तरह फेल है। ये बुलडोजर कहाँ चला रहे हैं, कैसे चला रहे हैं, हमसे मतलब नहीं है। मतलब ये उत्तर प्रदेश का लॉ एंड ऑर्डर जो दिन ब दिन खराब होता जा रहा है, वो कैसे ठीक हो।
And this is just the beginning. The UP Police and Prayagraj Development Authority have identified 20 people closely linked to Atiq Ahmed and also listed out their illegal properties in Prayagraj to conduct this bulldozer drive. The crackdown against Atiq Ahmed also continues. The gangster's apartment in Lucknow and 2 luxury cars have been seized now. The Yogi government has made it clear there will be no compromise on their crackdown on the gang war that's bled Uttar Pradesh for decades now. With Santosh Sharma, Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, this is where we wrap up the Newstrack tonight. Tomorrow is a big day. You've got the G20 meetings happening in the capital. Then there is the election results coming out of Tripura, Meghalaya, Nagaland. You can watch our live and continuing coverage starting 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning.
State of war ends. Now for verdict. Super suspense for 3 state results. Experience a new high in verdict reporting.
We have the most accurate pollster with us.
Absolutely bang on.
Accurate results at blinding speed. The only verdict broadcast India will watch. Verdict Day with the #1 election team.
Bali painting, a mural art form of Maharashtra, gives Aurangabad a facelift ahead of a G20 inception meeting. A group of 120 women painted non-stop for 6 hours to complete the artwork.
वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट शो करते हुए हम लोग ये जो प्रोजेक्ट कर रहे हैं वारली का, वर्ल्ड्स लार्जेस्ट वारली पेंटिंग जो है, जिसका रिकॉर्ड पहले पूना में था, उसको पूना के रिकॉर्ड को ब्रेक करते हुए, उसको चैलेंज करते हुए आज हम सब लड़कियां, वी आर 120 लेडीज हियर वर्किंग फॉर दिस वारली पेंटिंग टुडे। और इसका सबसे बड़ा क्रेडिट जो जाता है, जो मेरी बहुत अच्छी फ्रेंड है, वो है नंदिनी घोडेले। ये कॉन्सेप्ट जो जहाँ से आई है, वो लड़की ने सर 21 इयर्स की लड़की है। दिस इज रियली अ मोटिवेशन टू ऑल द गर्ल्स ओवर हियर।
The work spread over 3200 square feet will enter the India Book of Records 2024 in the social and cultural category. This painting breaks the earlier record of 3050 square feet set by artists in Pune. I congratulate all the dignitaries, those who have taken efforts, जिन्होंने इस इवेंट को एक सक्सेसफुल बनाया है, and congratulations to Aurangabad Municipal Corporation. There were no professional artists among the 120 participants. They came from different professions
like medicine, accountancy, and engineering. Bureau Report, India Today.
Priyanka Chopra is back as a spy.
Always be prepared. Don't move. It's done.
After kicking some bad guys in her first American drama thriller series Quantico as Alex Parrish,
I had a feeling it was you. All this time, I knew you were AIC. I was not.
our very own Desi girl is all set to treat her fans with yet another spy thriller titled Citadel. PC took to social media to share the first glimpse of the key characters from her upcoming venture. She will essay the role of Nadia Sin, an agent who is deceased according to the files. Co-starring Richard Madden, the action-packed sci-fi series will also see a hint of romance between him and Priyanka. Helmed by Avengers fame ace director duo Russo brothers, Citadel is also being adapted in Hindi by Raj and DK and will be headlined by Varun Dhawan and Samantha Ruth Prabhu. It was in December last year when Priyanka announced the wrap of a much-anticipated outing and captioned the post, "It's a wrap on Citadel." Phew, a whole year of doing the most intense work during the most intense time. It could not have been possible without this incredible lot of people. Priyanka has been proving her merit in Hollywood for quite some time now. Rather, she's actually ruling it. As she also has a couple of other biggies lined up for release, including Love Again, co-starring Sam Hugan and Celine Dion. And what the fans love equally as much as a spy thriller is seeing PC in a romantic drama.
You know, I'm just wearing my dead boyfriend's shirt and texting his old number.
This James C. Strauss directorial is exactly that and is all set to hit theatres on 12th of May. Meanwhile, Priyanka was last seen in the widely famous Matrix franchise titled The Matrix Resurrections, portraying the role of Sati in the sci-fi film alongside Keanu Reeves, Jada Pinkett Smith and Carrie-Anne Moss.
Hello, Neo.
I know you.
I tried to keep my eye on you.
Why?
We met a long time ago.
Back home, Priyanka also has Farhan Akhtar's Jile Zara in her kitty, co-starring Alia Bhatt and Katrina Kaif. And with this interesting lineup of projects, Priyanka Chopra continues to slay both the worlds of showbiz and across genres. From action-packed spy thriller
Blot her tears. It would be weird to give her tissue.
to a romance drama, she surely knows how to switch gears when it comes to acting with perfection.
Dreams. For 3 years, I've called this my home. A new life of peaceful serenity. A tranquil sanctuary full of beauty, love, and the simplest of pleasures.
With Gyanisha Malik, Entertainment Bureau, India Today.
2 years since you passed. I still can't believe it.
Who is sending me these texts?
Every morning I open my eyes hoping I'll still see you.
Because when the sun comes up,
Maybe we just take it a little slow.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com.
State of war ends. Now for verdict. Super suspense for 3 state results. Experience a new high in verdict reporting.
We have the most accurate pollster with us.
Absolutely bang on.
Accurate results at blinding speed. The only verdict broadcast India will watch. Verdict Day with the #1 election team.
Co-presented by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Co-presented by Panasonic, create today, enrich tomorrow. Co-powered by Citadel, it helps. Co-powered by Serra, this is your space, play it your way.
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today. This is your prime time destination. News, newsmakers, talking points, and we've got plenty on the show tonight. The big G20 foreign ministers meet kicks off in the national capital. The big question, are these countries powerless to stop the Ukraine war? What really is the role India is playing? Also, Bulldozer Raj in Uttar Pradesh will be joined by the MLA from Prayagraj, Siddharth Nath. He joins us on what lies ahead. But first, as always, it's time for the 9 headlines at 9. India hosts the G20 foreign ministers meet in the backdrop of growing divisions over settling the Ukraine war. India seeks to convince Russia and China to go along with the consensus. A day after his top ministers are forced to quit, Arvind Kejriwal likens Modi government to the Indira Gandhi regime. Atishi Marlena, Saurabh Bhardwaj to be inducted as the new Delhi ministers. A big opposition meeting in Tamil Nadu on Stalin's 70th birthday. Congress makes a U-turn on wanting to lead the alliance in 2024. National Conference's Farooq Abdullah bats for Stalin, says he must enter national politics. BJP kickstarts a Vijay Sankalp Yatra in pole-bound Karnataka. Yatra to cover 8,000 kilometers, 75 public meetings and 150 road shows. Bulldozers raise down property of the Umesh Pal murder accused Atiq's aide in Prayagraj. Akhilesh Yadav targets the Yogi government, says those who give themselves clean chit should stay silent on the mafia crackdown. Foreign funding license of leading think tank Center for Policy Research suspended by the union government. The CPR issues a statement, says it will cooperate with the authorities. Bill Gates visits top Tata Group honchos, meets Ratan Tata and Chandrasekharan. The Microsoft founder says his foundation is looking forward to partnering in health, diagnostics and nutrition. And the Ambani family granted nationwide Z+ security by a top court. Supreme Court says Ambanis will bear the expense of their security upgrade. And India bowled out for just 109 in the first innings of the third test at Indore. Matt Kuhneman picks his first 5-wicket haul to put the Aussies, who lead by 46 with 6 wickets in hand, on top. But first, the story that's breaking this evening amidst the growing speculation over who will challenge Prime Minister Modi in 2024. Former Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah has made a big statement at MK Stallin's birthday bash. Farooq has told the Congress president there, Mallikarjun Kharge, forget the Prime Minister face issue, win the elections first. Kharge claims that he never spoke about who will be the Prime Minister. All of this comes against growing speculation as to whether the Congress will pitch Rahul Gandhi to lead an opposition coalition and whether that will be acceptable to other opposition leaders. Remember, Mallikarjun Kharge had claimed that the Congress was prepared to bring opposition parties together. But Farooq Abdullah has clearly sung a different tune as to what should be done when it comes to leadership. Listen in to Farooq Abdullah.
Let us forget who is going to become the Prime Minister. Let us first win the election, then think who is going to become the Prime Minister.
I never said who will lead, who will become the Prime Minister. Farooq Saab, I am telling you.
Okay, so that's the big birthday bash that is being held of M.K. Stalin, the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister. Interestingly, Farooq Abdullah, and I'll play that also in a moment, when asked a question by a reporter as to whether he thought that M.K. Stalin could also be projected as a potential face of the opposition in 2024, had his own view on that as well. Listen in once again to Farooq Abdullah when he was asked a question about M.K. Stalin's prime ministerial, a possibility of M.K. Stalin playing that role. But Paulomi Saha joins me at the moment. Paulomi, how is this being read? The fact that Farooq Abdullah says, don't even think about leadership before the elections. All of this will only happen if we win the election. Is this a recognition in a way that the issue of leadership will only divide the opposition?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is definitely the kind of message that Dr. Farooq Abdullah is trying to send out over there, because we've already seen that those kind of fissures, Rajdeep, arise as far as the opposition is concerned. The talk around who will be leading the opposition against the Bharatiya Janata Party in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, and already there are those who are projecting themselves, or those who are saying that there are others who could possibly be fronting these formations, including, of course, from the Congress party, voices, of course, pushing and endorsing the case of Rahul Gandhi, to Nitish Kumar, to Dr. Farooq Abdullah today, as you were mentioning earlier, when reporters asked him if M.K. Stalin could be a prime ministerial candidate, saying why not? He could, of course, be a candidate himself. Right. So clearly there are several names that are arising. But in the midst of this, will the cause and will the sort of the strength that is to be put together in order to fight the behemoth that is the Bharatiya Janata Party, will that be lost, is what Dr. Farooq Abdullah seems to be pointing towards.
Very interesting the way you're putting it, because let's listen in, Paulomi, to what Farooq Abdullah said at the airport in Chennai when reporters there asked him, could Stalin be a potential face for 2024? Listen in.
See, when we all unite and we win the election, it will be at that time that they will decide who is the best man to lead this nation and to unite this nation together.
What are the chances for CM Stalin to become the PM?
Why not? Why can't he become the PM? So why? What is wrong with that?
Kaun banega challenger? Lots of people in that race. Paulomi Saha, appreciate you joining me at the top of the news today on what happens next there. Let's turn from there to our top focus tonight. India is hosting the biggest G20 foreign ministers meeting held by any member states. But the fact is, the meeting is taking place against growing divides within the G20 bloc on how to tackle the Russia-Ukraine war. Will India be able to navigate this, as well as be able to actually have a voice of its own on that big issue? Ukraine is looming large. It's our top story tonight.
Foreign ministers of the world's most powerful nations are assembling in New Delhi for a G20 meet under the cloud of the raging war in Ukraine, and the divide appears far too big to be bridged. At one end of the table are the West nations led by the US, and at the other end, Russia backed by China. The hosts, India, will be walking the tightrope. What will be on Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar's mind is the failure at the G20 finance ministers meet in Bengaluru recently, when the group could not agree on a joint communique.
don't think it would be really correct for me to prejudge the outcome of the G20 foreign ministers meeting. I think we should let the plenipotentiaries of the G20 foreign ministries meeting decide that on their own. For us, the questions relating to the food, energy and the fertilizer security, the impact that the conflict has on these economic challenges that we face.
How tough the task could be is evident from two statements issued by the UK and Russia. While London has said Foreign Secretary James Cleverly will call out Russian aggression in Ukraine at the meeting, Moscow says the actions of the West have put the world on the brink of a disaster. Now consider this. Two of the key players, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, have not met in person since the Ukraine war started. And the two sides have hardened their stance over the last few weeks. US President Joe Biden visited Ukraine on February 20th, declaring unwavering support to Volodymyr Zelensky.
And just today, that announcement includes artillery ammunition for HIMARS and howitzers, more javelins, anti-armor systems, air surveillance radars to help protect Ukrainian people from aerial bombardments. Later this week, we will announce additional sanctions against elites and companies that are trying to evade sanctions and backfill Russia's war machine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin hit back with a nuclear threat.
When all the leading NATO countries have declared their main goal as inflicting a strategic defeat on us, make our people suffer, as they say, how can we ignore their nuclear capabilities in these conditions? Especially as they are sending tens of billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine. And this is participation to a certain extent.
The meet is also important for another reason. Jaishankar will be holding a bilateral meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Qin Gang, where the two will also take up the boundary dispute. With Geeta Mohan, Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, is the G20 then powerless to stop this war in Ukraine? What role can India play? Is the world staring at a prolonged war? Has India not been able to give a strong enough message, particularly to the Russians? These are some of the questions I will raise. Sviatoslav Yurash is a Ukrainian member of parliament. KC Singh is former Secretary MEA. Andrew KP Lewing is China's strategist and analyst. He joins me from Hong Kong. Ashok Sajanar, former Indian diplomat, and Richard Rosso, director of the chair in US-India Policy Studies from CISS in Washington. Appreciate all of you joining us. I want to come to each of you for preliminary remarks on that big question. Is G20 powerless to stop this war in Ukraine? KC Singh, why don't you start off? Because India's position itself seems ambivalent at the moment. At one level, we are talking about ending an era of war, as the Prime Minister said to Vladimir Putin. But at the same time, we seem reluctant to call out the Russians and say this is a war. In fact, when there was a communique at the G20 meeting last week in Bangalore, we were not willing to fully criticize the Russians, preferring to use words like crisis or challenge. Is it time now to call the Russians and